And now, your go-to source for year-round fantasy hockey advice, DFS, and betting coverage. This is NHL Fantasy on Ice, presented by Skip, the official food delivery app of the NHL.
The stretch drive to the fantasy playoffs is here, brought to you by good friends over at Skip. It's time for another edition of NHL Fantasy on Ice. Week 22 waiver wire edition / deadline fallout. Nick Alberga, Pete Jensen, and Anna Do with you. What's going on, Pete?
What's going on, everybody? Skip, the official food delivery app of the NHL, and boy, did the NHL trade deadline deliver the days leading up to it. A big bomb on the night before with Jake Guentzel going to Carolina, and we'll get to all the winners and losers and Skip, the official food delivery app of the NHL.
Yeah, everyone thought this was going to be a slow trade deadline with the Guentzel trade coming through the day before, but let me tell you, Nick, I was pretty surprised by some moves that were made on Friday, specifically one right down to the wire.
Guys, did we watch a different deadline? I think the winners of this deadline were the teams that stayed away from all the action. There was a couple of trades of significance. We'll go through that. But, Anna, I think you're right. The Hurdle deal came out of nowhere, but from a fantasy perspective, we're not going to see this guy till the playoffs. They can say what they want. He's not going to show up till the postseason. But Pete, that definitely came out of nowhere. His name wasn't even on the radar, right?
That one was insane. That's tough to wrap your mind around if you're a Sharks fan. Remember, he was scoring those big goals in that one series against Vegas to rip their hearts out. Of course, the Sharks never went on to win the Cup, and Vegas did. Now he's joining the enemy here, but if they get him back for the playoffs and or Mark Stone like last year, that is still the team to beat. I think that's what we take away from this deadline, Anna, right? Even if Carolina improved drastically or Florida improved drastically with Tarasenko, Carolina also got Kuznetsov, a nice reclamation project there, but Vegas is still on top of the world right now after the deadline.
Yeah, it seems like all roads are leading to Vegas, guys. I'm not going to lie, but I will give the Hurricanes some credit. Got to see them over at the Rock in New Jersey. The team looked dominant against the Devils. They didn't stand a chance in that one. And then the way they played just yesterday against the Calgary Flames. 7 goals. This team had so many guys find the back of the net. They look like they finally have that depth. And the Carolina Hurricanes were my preseason pick to win the Stanley Cup. And finally, it seems like they might be edging out towards being the front runner.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. On paper, obviously, you look at Vegas, it's easy to proclaim them, the winners of the trade deadline. When you get Hanifin, when you get Mantha, when you get Hurdle, pretty damn good. But I like the fact that you brought up Carolina. That's probably the team that stands out to me, aside from Florida, which we'll get to. Evgeny Kuznetsov gets traded. He's on that bird 3 seconds after the trade from Hershey, and all of a sudden he wants to play hockey again. I watched this guy over the weekend. Looked like a different player from the guy I saw in Washington earlier this year. Didn't get any points over the weekend, but as you guys referenced, Carolina dominant over New Jersey and Calgary, outscoring them 11-4. So, Pete, you look at the positioning of Kuznetsov right away. And by the way, this guy is very, very available, under 15% last time I looked last night. But Nason Kuznetsov-Natchez on the second line and PP1. I think Kuznetsov's a must-add right now.
I think so, for sure. This Carolina Hurricanes squad, I feel like week after week, we've seen guys like Teravainen sneak onto the waiver wire list as well. And this is the time of the year down the stretch with the way they're playing that any part of that Hurricanes top 6 is a must-add. And think about Kuznetsov when Jake Guentzel gets back into the mix as well. I know he is nearing return. I don't think they're going to break up that top line. So now is the last opportunity you may have, because when he starts playing with Jake Guentzel, Nick, he's not going to become available.
That's exactly it. I just think you look at that new look top 6, if you want to call it that, for Carolina. I think they're more equipped to, be in the rigors of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Like, Freddie Anderson's back in the mix. They got the back end, and they got the depth scoring, and that's the biggest thing I love about Jake Guentzel. You talked about it from a fantasy perspective. He's not going to be a big story, I think, down the stretch, obviously, because he's banged up. But in the playoffs, playoff Jake, he just does his thing in the postseason. I just love that look now with the Carolina Hurricanes and just the depth they possess. Pete, what do you think of that Kuznetsov ad?
I like it a lot, and I think the number 2 center hole has been up for grabs in Carolina for a long time, right? It was Kokoniemi's spot to lose. He lost it. Jack Drury, I think he's a little banged up right now. And I think if Kuznetsov works out in the number 2 center hole, like, that gives me the vote of confidence, and again, he's going to have that extra motivation in the playoffs. That's what you're dying for if you're Carolina. You're looking for those extra wrinkles compared to past postseasons where they've had a very high floor. And with Svechnikov and Freddie and Kuznetsov and Jake Gensel, I mean, he's as good as it gets in the playoffs. My big question for Gensel is, like, is he going to be the same caliber player without playing with Sidney Crosby, who has been attached at the hip, or he's been attached to Crosby's hip for his entire career here?
Pete, I love that you asked that question because it's exactly what I was going to throw to you guys. Surprise, surprise. So Pittsburgh makes that trade. And who's in it? Michael Bunting. Of course, Kyle Dubas knows him very, very well. So he's now going to be attached to the hip. Do you like that look, Anna, with a guy like Michael Bunting, who's had a very disappointing first year out of Toronto after a couple of successful years, I would say, playing with Austin Matthews, because he's right away with Crosby and Rust in the first power play unit there.
On the top line as well, and that's what I was looking at when Michael Bunting made that switch, because, Nick, you couldn't have said it any better. The biggest reason why he struggled with the Hurricanes a bit was because he didn't have that elite placement that he used to have in Toronto. He was playing with solid players in Toronto. He was a 60-point player, got 20 goals on the board in multiple years with the Maple Leafs, and it just goes to show that some of these guys really flourish when they're with elite talent, and if you're playing with Sidney Crosby, that's pretty much as elite as it gets. So Michael Bunting was definitely the guy I kept my eye on, because when we're taking a look at Jake Gensel, guys, like, his individual fantasy value takes a little bit of a hit moving to Carolina from Pittsburgh. It's not the same caliber of player he was with the Penguins. Now he's having to share the puck with other talent that the Hurricanes have, when Pittsburgh really didn't have that same situation. So I think Bunting is kind of like the guy who's going up, and Gensel is the kind of guy who's going down.
Yeah, I think it's important to stress, Pete, that obviously from a depth standpoint, much different. Carolina's a team that rolls all four lines. They never understood the Bunting ad to begin with. They added him to be like a third-line player when I think he's better suited for the top six. But I think right now, if you're heading down the stretch and you're close to the fantasy playoffs, I think Bunting's a guy, Pete, I would take a flyer on.
Right, and another question we definitely have to ask, and fans were asking about it, who's the biggest sleeper of the deadline? Has a chance to be Bunting, has a chance to be Anthony Duclair, who scored in his Lightning debut, and just an absolute romp for the Tampa Bay Lightning to remind everybody that they're still in the thick of the playoff chase here. But curious to hear who you like, Anna, as the biggest sleeper. I know you were high pre-trade on Anthony Mantha, but wondering if anyone else has caught your eye since.
I think Duclair is the one that sticks out to me a little bit, just because every time he's been on a good team and he's been healthy, he's really proven himself. And I feel like his stats sometimes fly under the radar. Like, he was a 30-goal scorer with the Florida Panthers, and now he's finally getting the opportunity to be back with Tampa Bay on a solid squad. And we saw his performance. He had a goal. He had a 2-point performance in his first game with Tampa Bay. What better start could you ask for a guy like Anthony Duclair?
Yeah, that's got to be a boost to Duclair, right? Plays with Stamkos and Cirelli over the weekend on second power play unit. I think at the very least he's a solid stream option. Not to go with a trifecta, I'll go with Jake Allen. I like the pickup for New Jersey. They're cooked. They're done. They're not making the playoffs. But I think the important thing to stress here is that Allen was in a 3-goalie system, and I do think it affected his play throughout this season. Unchained now, obviously he's going to be a 1-2 with Kakkonen. He's the number one now for New Jersey. I think they're going to win some games. And I actually think he could ignite the Devils. So I think if there's a sneaky goaltender that you could stream or play on your roster down the stretch, because the Devils, guys, we've talked about it all year. Good roster, just couldn't get a save. So now that they can get a save, I wonder how different they can look. So I'll go with Jake Allen, Pete.
It's a good point you make, and they also traded away Vanacek. When the trade first happened, and I remember we were saying, like, how is this going to shake out? Is it going to be Vanacek and Allen, and they send the two young guys down? But not so fast. They shipped out Vanacek, who was a big disappointment after signing with the Devils a couple years ago. So now it's a little bit more clarity. And, yeah, Jake Allen has been respectable through the years, whether he was the backup to whoever it was at the time, Halak or Binnington in St. Louis, and then, part of a rotation in Montreal for a team that was dwindling in recent years. But the Devils are still right there. If teams like Buffalo are still alive, the Devils are still alive, even with what you're knocking them on. And, of course, the Islanders are in the driver's seat since we last talked.
Yeah, I'm not gonna make any comments about the New Jersey Devils for like the rest of the month. Okay, in April I'll reevaluate. I'm taking like a detox, guys. This is the time of the fantasy hockey season where you can take a step back and just relax and take a detox from these teams that have wronged you, and maybe be a little bit delulu and hope things turn around down the final stretch of the regular season. But no comments on the New Jersey Devils, guys.
Never say never. They can make a run. I think most importantly, they have a goaltender, and I went over the numbers last week. They got to go like 15-5 at least down the stretch, so we'll see if they can do it. They got Travis Green in the mix there. They got a number one goaltender. They still don't have Dougie Hamilton, but again, if there's a team that could do it, maybe it's the New Jersey Devils, and certainly on the radar after the significant deadline for them. Just adding a goalie. It wasn't Markstrom, it wasn't Allmark, but it was Jake Allen. The team I want to bring up that this is sort of stealth business is Florida and Vladimir Tarasenko. I think he's still being priced as an Ottawa Senator in DFS markets and stuff like that, but I know his value has skyrocketed big time in the fantasy world, where I think before the deal he was in the 30 percentile. Now he's over 60%, climbing towards 70. Gets 2-1 over the weekend against Calgary. Pete, how about this lineup placement with Barkov and Reinhart and PP2 for Vladimir Tarasenko?
I mean, you guys know it better than anyone how good Reinhart has been this year. And Barkov is a stud, one of the top 5 centers in the league, probably, all things considered, all elements of his game. So, yeah, factor in Tarasenko, who was, 5 or 6 straight seasons of 30-plus goals and one of the best goal scorers in the league in his heyday. And we've been waiting, right? It's been a bunch of teams that he's been playing for, 4 teams in the past 2 years now that he's in Florida. But, yeah, that was lightning in a bottle the other day. And as much as we talk about Carolina, being equipped to get back to the Eastern Conference Final, like Florida's more than equipped to come out of the Atlantic Division after upgrading here at the deadline. So, yeah, it's a huge move from a Stanley Cup futures perspective, because Florida is right now, based on everything we've seen this season, the very best team in the entire NHL, and they just got stronger.
Are we going to see the exact same conference finals, guys, this year
Probably.
in the NHL? I feel like with the way things are going, there's a decent chance that it's going to be very deja vu when all is said and done.
Yeah, you never know. This stuff is just so weird. Like, I never try to get too high, too low post-deadline. There's a couple teams I really like. I like Dallas's acquisition of Tanev. It's got no bearing in fantasy hockey, but love that. Love what Colorado did with adding some depth, and, of course, the Vegas Golden Knights. And don't sleep on Winnipeg. I think they've been a sleeper all season long, guys, but I love the addition, obviously, of a Sean Monahan, and now you add Tyler Toffoli seemingly out of nowhere. I think it gives a different look to that top 6, and it's pretty amazing that like a year ago we were talking at the trade deadline and Winnipeg was a lost team and bonuses rattled, and all of a sudden they're one of the better teams in the league. I know they're going through a bit of a blip right now, convincing win for the Canucks over the weekend, but Winnipeg's top 6 is scary, Pete.
Yeah, Winnipeg is one of those teams out there like that I think you can call based on where they stack up on the odds board, a dark horse to actually hoist the Stanley Cup in the end. But I feel like whether it's Colorado or Dallas that runs into them in the first round, they're going to have their hands full. And the biggest reason why is because of Hellebuck. And the fact that team has some stability and that it's not reeling like what has happened in Calgary with, selling everybody off. Like that hasn't happened in Winnipeg. They made a couple of sneaky good trades through the years. They kept the guys that want to be there. They re-signed some guys that were up in the air. That means they want to be there, Anna. And then Winnipeg is going into the playoffs a lot different than last year, where they really limped in, and they still gave Vegas a good fight in that first round, some of those games. So I think the ceiling's very high for the Jets.
I don't know. I mean, like top to bottom, I've been thinking about which team I think is best equipped for the postseason, and it honestly might be the Winnipeg Jets, because when you're taking a look at the way Connor Hellebuck has played this year with how tumultuous goaltending has been, he's right there at the top of the board as like the Vezina favorite right now. And then their top 6 forward group is great, as we mentioned. Adding Tyler Toffoli makes it even better. But when you're looking at their bottom 6 forward group, those guys also get points on the board. Like they're guys like Mason Appleton, Niederreiter, like Nemesnikov, wherever they play in the lineup, they're still getting some sort of action. And then on their blue line, like the list goes on and on. Like Josh Morrissey has proven what kind of defenseman he is, and all of these guys go on these little point streaks and runs. I think the Winnipeg Jets may be the best equipped team in the NHL to like make a deep run this year.
Very structured, and don't forget about Gabe Vilardi either, who's banged up right now. I think would solidify that top 6 for that team. Again, continuing with the deadline fallout theme, some other players to look at or monitor at the very least. Anthony Mantha playing with Dorofeyev and Stevenson and PP2 with Vegas. Hannafin paired with Pietrangelo and PP2. And my guy Adam Henrique ends up in Edmonton. I think his value goes down. Obviously starts with Draisaitl. Doesn't go according to plan. They lost to Buffalo twice over the weekend in the same game. Go look at that. But now playing with Kane and Brown on the third line, no PP time for Adam Henrique, but obviously a chance to win a Stanley Cup here. So even like the Wenberg ad, like there's going to be some stealth ads that play out. I think you got to look at some of the players that went from contending teams to diminishing teams or just playing out the string. I think there's no pressure, so keep an eye on that over the next couple weeks, right, Pete?
Off that team, I really like the Bowen Byram trade for the Sabres. It brings some respectability to the entire, not only the defense, but the organization, right? Like the guy won the Stanley Cup as a young player, still, 23 years old or something like that, 22. It's crazy. And I love that trade because it fills the need in second line center for Middlestat. Middlestat should have a great finish to the season if he's playing with Nichushkin and either Drouin or Lehkonen. But like that's a trade where like the Avs address their short-term need and Buffalo bolsters its area of weakness, Anna, for the years to come. It was a nice pickup by Adams in Buffalo.
This has to be like Pete Jensen dream trade.
Yeah.
Ever. Like I was like,
so.
is Pete sneaking into the GM office in Buffalo over here? Because I don't know a single person who likes the Sabres and Bowen Byram more than Pete Jensen, guys. So he's over the moon right now. This is Pete's month. He's in his lucky girl era.
Yeah, I think so too. I'll be honest, Pete. I didn't feel the same way as you when I made that trade. I got why Colorado did it. Didn't get why Buffalo did it. I was sort of laughing. I was watching a broadcast and they were talking about Bowen Byram wanted a bigger opportunity. Well, I know Cale Makar's in Colorado, but then you go to Buffalo. They got Dahlin, they got Power, and now they got Byram. I just don't know how that's going to work out. We talked about this going into the year. How many cooks can you have in that kitchen? We talked about it with Pittsburgh, right? It was Letang and Karlsson. And that's gone where. It was ditto for guys like Brent Burns and Karlsson in San Jose. I know there's one theme with that conversation, but like that's all I wonder from a fantasy point of view. How much value can you extract from a Bowen Byram, knowing there's always going to be somebody ahead of him, and that guy's name is Rasmus Dahlin.
Right, and it's a good, fair keeper debate to debate Byram and Owen Power in a keeper league. And one person on Instagram and on the fantasy account was saying neither, because they're both going to be behind Dahlin on the power play one equation. And that's fair, but I kind of like, for Byram's standpoint, like they're already playing him with Rasmus Dahlin on the top pair. The only time he was getting top pair minutes, Anna, in Colorado was when either Makar or Taves was injured. I mean, he was never going to see that role long-term there. Here could be a part of the solution, and I think whether it's on the power play to defenseman set or even second power play unit, I think he could teach the players in Buffalo a lot about what he learned from the likes of McKinnon, Rantanen, and Makar for a couple of years in Colorado.
Yeah, I think at least for a short-term stream, there's no harm, no foul here. But I have to side with Nick right now. I'm not too sold on the Buffalo Sabres down the stretch this year, Pete. I think there are some teams that are very much fighting to sneak their way into the playoffs that are going to be going all out, winning games and getting their guys to perform the best. And I think Buffalo just got lucky a little bit post-trade deadline bump, but not sold on the team this season.
Tell you something, the team I thought was going to be the busiest wasn't at all, and I know they made some trades, but the Vancouver Canucks, right? And then they have the game on Saturday. Demko goes down, convincing win against the Winnipeg Jets. But what does that mean in fantasy hockey? It means we don't really know much in terms of what's going on with Demko. I think we'll find out over the next couple of days. But internally, Casey DeSmith is your obvious pickup. Externally, as I mentioned, Jake Allen, who, by the way, is dealing with visa issues right now, so not with the Devils just yet. Philip Grubauer has been fantastic since coming back from injuries. 5-1-0, 1.63 and 943 and one shutout. And UPL in Buffalo. Who would you take, Pete?
I mean, it's tough for me to invest too much in Grubauer just because Decord statistically has been like between top 5 and top 10 goalie based on his volume and his save percentage this season. So I would probably fade Grubauer, and I don't know that the Kraken are getting in. The Wild probably aren't getting in either. So, I mean, give them credit for what they pulled yesterday to get that extra point, the risk-taking there, but they're still like 8 or 9 points back. So I would fade some of those, middling teams. UPL has been doing this for like 2 months now, so put some respect on that guy's name, what he's doing with an array of, bad players around him defensively. So maybe he gets a bump from having Byram. So I kind of like UPL, not to go too Sabres heavy, but just wanted to give a little respect to what he's done.
Yeah, I was waiting for Pete to bring up UPL when you asked that question. I was just waiting for that to fall through. But I would have to agree there with the ones you gave. I hope the listeners of this podcast listened to us when we told them to pick up Frederick Anderson, because I feel like that would have been your biggest win right now, guys. Like, if you added him to your roster, you're probably thrilled. That is the goalie that stood out to me this past couple of weeks, especially him coming back from injury, and then what Carolina did at the trade deadline. They have a goalie system they're not committed to either. So if you're looking for a daily fantasy situation or short-term streams, look at who's starting in net for the Hurricanes that night.
I mean, you were saying it's my lucky week or whatever. Freddie's back, baby. I'm so excited about that. And wanted to also touch on, since we last talked, the Devils made the coaching change, right? Like, I know that we've been down on that team. Do you see any bump? You're buddies with Travis Green, right, Nick? What do you think he's going to? You think he's going to have a better result second time around compared to what he wasn't that great in Vancouver years ago, but maybe an opportunity here to get the most out of a very talented young team?
I think it's fascinating because, like, Lindy Ruff, like, the guy was just begging for a goalie, and then you trade for a goalie after you fire him. Like, it was so clear what the issue was in New Jersey, and that was the crease. And now you sort of solidify that. You bring in Jake Allen, and that's when you make the coaching change. I know maybe you guys have a bit more belief in that Devils team than I do to make the playoffs this year, but, like, they're up against it, and I think they're hoping for that new coach bump. It hasn't happened just yet, but again, the crease is a different story. Obviously, still going through some things with the guys they've acquired, so we'll see this week. I like the addition. I think Green's been waiting for this opportunity. I think you look at this Devils team, the one thing that's not talked about enough, Anna, is Dougie Hamilton, not having him in the lineup. They're rather young on the back end, and now you trade Toffoli. I don't know who this is boosting. I think Jack Hughes is a guy, they're never going to admit it. There's no way this guy is close to 100%. Just watching the games, it's not the same player. Luke Hughes is taking on a bigger responsibility. There's a lot more questions than I had going into the season, remarkably, Anna, with the New Jersey Devils right now.
I don't know how we got back into talking about the Devils when I said that I had no further comments about the New Jersey Devils, but what you've said is very true. Like, this team is just not what anyone expected them to be. You wonder if there was too much pressure on this squad with the way they performed last year, and it got to their heads because it's just a mess. Like, Jack Hughes definitely is not 100% healthy. Dawson Mercer has fallen off the face of the planet. On their back end, you don't know who's going to show up one night, who's not going to show up another night. Haven't been too impressed with either of the Hughes brothers as of late, and Timo Meier is like maybe their one bright
He's
spot.
been hot.
Like,
yeah.
That's it. Like, if you want to be excited about New Jersey, maybe it's finally Timo time, but that's not enough for a team like that to compete with other squads that are getting closer and closer.
We're in a 6-game point streak for Meier and 12 points in his past 8 games. That might be the X factor. Like, that guy was missing in action for the past calendar year pretty much since the trade, right, guys? But, like, he could be the guy that could really make a difference and be a game breaker for that team if they are going to just wake up all of a sudden. Like, the Islanders, I saw 7-2-1 or something in their past 9 after a victory against Anaheim on Sunday night. So, and they have another late game against the Kings. I like them to keep that rolling. The Islanders have some nice balance in their lineup, and sometimes a coaching change can make all the difference. You can't always put your finger on why, but more times than not, right? Like 60 to 70% of the time, I feel like it usually works out and benefits the team.
Pete, we were talking about this throughout the season. Every team that's made a coaching change has seen a boost in production and value and win percentage. The Islanders are fascinating to me. I guess Lou Lamoriello was sleeping on deadline day, and they did nothing. Like, I don't know what's going on there. I got so many questions, but they're like, we're not doing this deadline thing this year. We're not helping this team out. And maybe he took the approach of this team hasn't proven enough to me that they're worthy of a deadline pickup, so we're not going to do it. We all know how stealth Lou Lamoriello is, but that team is playing really, really well right now. The back end, they're getting the goaltending, which is great to see. Barzal's been fantastic. Brock Nelson, the guy every year is just really, really consistent in the fantasy world. And I don't mind the idea of letting the players do the talking. I think obviously in the media we talk about the deadline, we overhype it to an extreme, and I think every year it's those teams that really don't do much around deadline time that go on a crazy run. And I wondered, like, what if? Why can't the Islanders go on that significant run? And I think you look conversely, as we started off the podcast, the Detroit Red Wings, you lose Dylan Larkin, and all of a sudden the Islanders, Anna, back in the equation here.
That is the storyline right now with the New York Islanders. This is a team that I feel like I can never quite trust, but they always give me a reason to, because they're always in the mix at the end of the day. Like, this is a team that has made the conference finals so many times with a lot of the players that are currently on their squad, and you can just never discount them. And even taking a look right now, like, they're not far off. They're not far off. And the New Jersey Devils should be worried, because I don't think they can catch up to them with the way that they're playing. The New York Islanders are a significantly better team. Detroit should be worried with their injuries. And I've said this time and time again. I think that Ilya Sorokin is the best goalie in the NHL. And when he's at his best, he can take whatever team to whatever lengths. And that's why I think the New York Islanders might be my pick to like sneak into the playoffs here. It's Donzo for the rest of those guys.
They're only 2 points behind the Flyers, who are reeling a little bit and dealing with some injuries and adversity of their own. Of course, Tortorella suspended 2 games after the antics over the weekend. Pretty funny stuff. But I think that, like, really you're looking at the Islanders getting into this thing, whether they catch Detroit or they're catching Philly, barring any unforeseen injury or something like that. And you're looking at Buffalo being 7 points behind the Red Wings, who have gotten no support ever since Larkin went down, right? The Capitals are playing well. They're right in the mix. They're only 3 points behind Detroit. Are you buying into any of these Washington guys? It's funny, they sell at the deadline, but they're still in the thick of this thing, and they absolutely blitzed the Penguins in that one game in the middle of all those trades.
Yeah, it's there's a cluster of teams. I guess if we're having that, I guess Pittsburgh's still in it, Pete, by your math.
I don't think so. I mean, I guess they have some games in hand, but I don't trust that team at all.
I don't know. It's intriguing to me. Like, even Washington, I had Max Pacioretty. I just dumped him. I don't know. That team, like, they sold, and I think they're going to be competitive down the stretch. Like, to me, I think Philly's obviously in it. The Islanders, Tampa, Detroit. Sure, if you want to include New Jersey and Buffalo, I think obviously those 2 teams we just talked about at the end there, the Devils and Buffalo, have to go on extended runs where you have to not only hop teams in the standings, but get 2 points in regulation. Like, there's a lot of math that goes into it, and it's pretty crazy, guys. Like, there's less than 20 games remaining in the regular season, and on top of that, the fantasy playoffs. Like, I know in both my leagues, my keeper leagues, I have fantasy playoffs that start after this week, so I'm getting amped and ready for that, and I have to make up some pickups and look at the schedules too, right?
I just really want to be as optimistic as Pete is about every single team and all the players in the league. Like, I just can't imagine looking at the world through that rose-colored glasses, because honestly, since we're talking about Washington having a chance right now, like, guys, like, that's insane. Washington does not have a chance. But if you want to short-term stream any of these guys, I will give Pete a little bit of credit. You want to add some points down the stretch, have these guys for a little period of time. They do intrigue me. Like, Dylan Strome has been playing really well. Alex Ovechkin is maybe a player that you think could bring some value for the rest of the year. John Carlson, I don't think we talk about enough. He's been playing really well in the back end for Washington too. So those are some names that stick out to me. Overall, though, it's not long-term guys you're keeping on your roster.
Definitely not. Let's wrap by looking at the schedule for this upcoming week, March 11th to 17th. The team you want to monitor this week, big news for Johnny Lazarus, big fan of the podcast, a 5-game slate for the New York Rangers. So stream away when it comes to the Rangers, the only team with a 5-game slate. There are 53 games in total, 4 on Monday, 10 Tuesday, 4 Wednesday, 12 on Thursday, 2 on Friday. Saturday, you got 14, 7 on Sunday. The 4-game teams to look at stream-wise, Anaheim, Carolina, Columbus, Detroit, L.A., Jersey, the Islanders, Ottawa, Pittsburgh, San Jose, St. Louis, Washington, Winnipeg, and stay away from Edmonton, Nashville, Tampa, Toronto, Vancouver. Just 2-game slates for those teams, Pete.
Right, and pertaining to the Rangers, I do like Jack Roslovic as a deadline sleeper, deep sleeper, if you want to say. He could play third-line center. He could also play top 6 right wing to plug a gap if, either Kakko or whoever, Lafreniere, goes into a slump like they have through their career. Personally, I don't understand the attachment to not only the first-round pick, but also Kaapo Kakko, but maybe that's a conversation for another day. Maybe we could have that conversation at the Sphere in Vegas if we're all there, right, guys?
Yeah. Fired up for that, Anna.
Pete's now going to get the inside scoop from the source itself about Capo Caco, but Alex Wenberg as well, if you want to take a look. I mean, if you're not high on Capo Caco, probably stay away from Alex Wenberg, who's playing with him, but I think he's proven himself as a player as of late. And in a daily fantasy situation, or if you're looking at particular spots on a night the Rangers are playing, I cannot hype this guy up enough. I think he's like my player of the season, and it's Vincent Trocheck, guys. Like, he is the most underrated player in the NHL. He gets points, he gets hits, he gets category coverage, he wins faceoffs. That is the guy to monitor on the Rangers. Don't get all starstruck by the Panarins and the Kreiders and the Zibanejad. There's Vincent Trocheck too.
You know what I want to see, guys? I haven't heard one person say it, but I've been waiting for it pretty much my whole life, whether it's in the 2-3 hole in the Metro or the division winner against the first wild card. I want to see Islanders Rangers in a playoff series this year, and I think it could finally happen based on these recent trends where the Rangers didn't make a move at the deadline and the Islanders are playing well. I want to see those two teams meet. I think it would be great theater, Nick.
Yeah, I saw Johnny predicting that. He's been bumping that thread all year long. I just don't know what's going on. He's a guy also boosted the Ottawa Senators. They've lost to everybody, 7 straight for them. Like, what a call that was. I mean, I've got stuff wrong before. I called Vegas to miss the playoffs last year, but yeah, the Ottawa Senators, just a disaster. I would love to see that too. I just think it would be unbelievable in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Speaking of unbelievable, guys, NHL Backstory, Episode 2. Tales from the trade deadline. Make sure to check that out. As somebody who loves trades the way I do, love the backstory on those, what's transpired in the past. I think the big thing I like post-deadline is like the fallout. Like, I love the drama. Like, Linus Ullmark still hugging Jeremy Swayman. It's like, no, bro, they tried to trade you the other day. P.L. Dubois, those rumors. Like, I think it's fascinating stuff when you hear stuff after the fact here, Pete.
Definitely. And I remember when Lindholm got traded, he was on the flight back to Calgary from vacation in Mexico right before going to All-Star Weekend in Toronto. So, yeah, you never know what you're going to hear from some of these tales of different guys being in transit and stuff like that when they hear the news. I always hate when you hear that a guy finds out on Twitter that he's been traded, but that's been the trend in recent years, of course.
Yeah, guys, on Twitter, I have been involved in a couple of trades this past trade deadline. Some sources said I was sent to Edmonton. Other sources said I was sent to Montreal. So I can't imagine how the guys who are actually traded feel when they just wake up one day. They got to pack everything and move to a new city and be with a new team.
Well, as you guys know, we made a very big trade of our own. Producer Bob Bender out today. Producer Ben Cook in. Phenomenal job, Benny boy, my guy. So there you have it for this week's episode. Moving forward later on in the week, Week 22 Mailbag Edition. Again, we're getting you all set for the fantasy playoffs as well. So many thanks to Ben Cook. For Pete Jensen and Anna Dua, I'm Nick Alberga. You've been listening to NHL Fantasy on Ice, delivered by Skip, the official food delivery app of the NHL.